So, hi everyone, I'm Chris Roberts. You may have known my past games like Wing Commander and Freelancer, and I used to actually be here based in Austin with Origin Systems and made the Wing Commanders here and then left Electronic Arts Origin in '96 and started Digital Anvil, which we built Freelancer and a lot of other pretty cool games. And then in 2001, I took a break and now I'm back with Star Citizen. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experiences. I kind of fondly look back in the time between about 1998 and 2001, sort of the golden era of PC games. It was pretty crazy, which is why there's the Gold Rush footage there. There was a huge amount of game publishers, there was a huge amount of developers. It felt like there was a lot of creativity. There wasn't a huge amount of cost in terms of developing and marketing and bringing games to the marketplace. So I think, there was a lot of great stuff that happened back then, and that was something that created things like the Wing Commanders or the Ultimas or a lot of other great games that you guys, I think, hopefully remember. PC gaming gave us some great graphic adventures, flight simulators, role-playing games, real-time strategy, first-person shooters, and, of course, space sims. And I'd like to, if you take a look at the current core gaming market, even on the consoles, you can trace most of the major games back to the PC. So you wouldn't have Call of Duty on a console if it wasn't for a PC. And, there's a whole, most of the genres, especially anything involving 3D, first came on the PC side. Around about 2000, things started to change. That was the first time that the consoles came out and their actual graphical power was capable with the PC, and in some cases slightly ahead of the PC at the time of release. They were smaller and cheaper. That always helps. And obviously there were two very big companies, Sony and Microsoft, willing to subsidize the initial cost of the hardware. So they're willing to write a couple of $1 billion off. That's one of the reasons why you can get a console for $300 or $400. And the user experience was streamlined, and you didn't have to deal with all the crazy DOS issues with the config files and a few other things that you probably had to struggle with back with Wing Commander or some other games. And so there was a shift definitely towards consoles. And in fact, on my side, that was actually one of the reasons why, when I sold Digital Anvil to Microsoft, I sort of took a break, because Microsoft was starting to focus on the Xbox, and it was a very different sort of world. They were wanting to focus on fewer, bigger titles, and I could see that the whole business was starting to kind of homogenize, and some of the fun and independence and the crazy sense of a land rush that you got with the PC was going away. Now, the last couple of years, and you've probably been seeing it for the last 10 years, people have been saying PC gaming is dead.
PC gaming is done, or rather, quote-unquote, serious PC gaming is done. Web-based diversions like MMOs and whatever Zynga's latest contribution is have a bright future yet, but everything else, not so much. First-person shooters have pretty much migrated fully to the consoles, and by next generation, everyone will have some variation of a pointer controller, and PCs won't have the tangential superiority of the keyboard and mouse even anymore to hold on to. Point-and-click adventures? Yeah, there's actually been a revival of those on the Wii. Beyond that, you're running out of the somewhat small number of genres that PCs could claim innate dominance in. It's pretty much down to just Civ-style god games and flight simulators at this point, if we're being honest, and at least one of those is probably going to make the transition to an online, portable social model within the next generation.
Well, that was from 2010. That just goes to show how smart the experts are in terms of predicting what's happening in the future. But this was kind of the way I was feeling when I started Star Citizen.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
But yeah, those are all in-game assets, and that's actually kind of what it looks like when you fly around. But my opinion is the PC is very much alive, and I think one of the key things that always gets missed out in the industry is that everybody is so fixated on whatever the next big thing is, they just forget the industry is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there are plenty of opportunities. There is room for PC games, there's room for console games, there's room for mobile games, there's even room for social games. And I think that the way you should look in gaming is very much along those lines. And I think the PC itself is a very viable market. It's not going to be necessarily the biggest market, but I think it's a very good one to focus on. I mean, there's over 50 million Steam users. I mean, there's 7 million concurrent sometimes on the Steam stuff, which is an indication of how many people are playing PC games at one time. There was 12 million copies of Diablo 3 sold on the PC. I mean, those are console numbers. There's 10 million, I think right now there's slightly under 10 million subscribers to World of Warcraft and have been for the last 6-7 years. And there's 32 million active players of League of Legends, which is a PC game. And there was about 45 million registrations on World of Tanks. So those are all PC games, and those are all numbers that no one should ever sniff at. I'm hoping that a fair number of you know who I am, but I created the Wing Commander franchise back in 1990. There was 5.5 iterations, and I did the first 4. I was a partner in Origin Systems, where we created games like Ultima and Wing Commander and Ultima Underworld and a bunch of other really great stuff. And we were acquired by Origin in 1992. In 96, when my employment contract was up with EA, because I'm not a big fan of being part of big companies, I left and founded Digital Anvil, which we partnered with Microsoft to make games, and Freelancer and Starlancer were 2 of the games that came out of that studio. And in early 2001, I sold it to Microsoft, and as I said, I'm not that interested in being part of very big corporate organizations. And so I took a break from the gaming business. I went to Hollywood to make films for a while, which was, if you've played my games, you know I'm very interested in narrative. But the film business is actually getting a lot more like the way the game business is now, in terms of there's only a few big event movies that the studios want to make. They don't want to make anything other than $200 million movies, and even the small, interesting art movies that you see are not financed by the studios. They're made with private money for almost no money at all, and then maybe, if you're that lucky, 1 or 2 out of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 movies that get made, you may get picked up and have a little bit of an Oscar run. So in terms of actually doing interesting things nowadays, I actually think the movie business isn't that great at all for it. And I think the game business is more interesting because of some of the things that have been happening that I'll be talking about later in this speech. Having a good run doing movies, I was feeling the itch to come back and make a game again. So I founded Cloud Imperium in the end of 2011, and Star Citizen was a result of it. So those are some of the games that I've been involved in. There's quite a few more, but these are specifically more the sci-fi space games. Those are a few of the film that I did. Outlander I think is actually quite a fun film. I don't know if any of you have seen it. And Lord of War is probably the one I'm the most proud of the movies I worked on. The takeaways for me from both games and films is that I think the current game publisher financing model is broken. It's one of the reasons why I went to the crowdfunding model. I think that there's things that I learned in terms of film production and discipline and production process, and some specialization that happens means to a sort of better production quality. So there was a lot of takeaways I had when I was actually making films. I definitely think the industry needs to recognize and acknowledge the team member talent on the game side. All the games I've made, except for the very first one when it was all just me doing it, are good because I also had really good people work with me, and they worked really hard and they had great stuff. My sort of feeling doing a lot of film and games and seeing the technology changes, I sort of feel that games ultimately will be the most immersive experience you can get, mainly just because you sort of put yourself in this world. So the difficulty with a movie, whenever you try and make a movie, is that you have to get the audience to care about the protagonist. And that's always actually kind of a bit of a stumbling block in terms of immersion in great movies. And I think in a game or in an interactive environment, the thing that you're going to get is that you don't have that barrier because you're basically the protagonist. So the challenge then is more about creating a believable world and creating believable other secondary characters that you interact with. And the game business isn't there yet, but I can see the potential down the road. When it gets there, I think the experiences that can be crafted in game will be pretty powerful. So for me, when I was feeling this, looking at it, I was thinking, what do I like? PC games. And I actually think there's hardly any competition in the PC space right now. Most of the big publishers are all focused on the console. They're focused on doing iterations on very well-known brands. And, you can take a look in the PC side and you can sort of see there's not a lot, but the ones that are specific, like EVE Online, I mean, they've just gone over 500,000 subscribers. They're 10 years in. That's a pretty dedicated base that's giving them $15 a month. League of Legends has millions and millions of people playing. I mean, 32 million active players is not something to be sniffed at. World of Tanks has a huge amount of registrations. But the key thing to notice about all three of these is they sort of bypass the traditional publish model and instead went directly to the core gaming audience. And that's actually the thing that I find really interesting is the opportunity for the direct connection, the online side. So the PC, I think, is a bigger platform than people give it credit for. The business model is good because you don't have to pay a lot of money. It's an open platform, essentially. So the problem with Microsoft or Sony is it's a closed platform. They curate it. You have to pay them licensing fees. And the issue with that is mainly just if you want to break into it and you want to keep your costs low, it's an expensive proposition. It's one of the reasons why only the big publishers can really play in the console space. And the other thing that's great about the PC is there's a lot of options for distribution. There's various things like Steam, and you can also go direct yourself. The thing that sort of happened last year, I find really interesting and compelling is crowdfunding sort of became popular and became on the radar, largely thanks to what Tim Schafer did with his Double Fine adventure. Everybody wanted to back a graphical adventure, and he got 3.3 million when he was actually only looking for about 400,000. And what that really sort of showed was that there is a demand for certain types of games and certain genres of games that aren't being serviced by the big publishers. I mean, the problem with the big publisher model is that if you're on a console, I mean, the breakdown of the numbers are, if I'm building a AAA game in a big publisher, it'll cost me about $30 million minimum to make that game, maybe even more, partly because the big publishers have big overheads. They're in fairly expensive areas. So you're already so let's say we're making a cheap one. It's $30 million just to make it. Then you got to market it. So on that kind of spend, you'll probably spend $15 million in marketing minimum. Maybe more like 20, but that sort of depends. Let's just say it's $15 million you're spending on marketing. Then at that point, you're already in for $45 million. You have costs of goods and everything, so you're only really netting, maybe after you've taken everything out, about $35 or so. You've got to be selling quite a few million copies just to break even. And then, of course, say you want to sell 3 million copies to break even, you've got to go and pre-order those copies from Sony and Microsoft. Each one of those copies will cost you $10, give or take a little bit. So you're about $30 million into cost of goods. So you add it all up, and you're $75 million in before you've sold a unit. And in a lot of cases, it's at least $100 million in. That isn't the realm that makes any sense for a smaller developer. And it also is a realm that doesn't make any sense if you can only sell 500,000 or 1 million copies, which, by the way, used to be great numbers 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, people would make a lot of money in that business. That essentially is a problem with the console business, and that's why you sort of see people go for Assassin's Creed, and they go for Call of Duty, and they go for Madden, and they go for Battlefield, because they know they can sell 5 million plus copies. But if you get rid of all that, and you're going direct to the public, and the fans that like the games are backing it, then you don't need to sell those numbers. You can, with even a couple of 100,000 units, you can do quite well. When we started out with Star Citizen, we decided to I'd actually lined up some private investors, and one of the things I told them was, and they were sort of skeptical of whether people wanted a PC game or whether people wanted a space sim, so I sort of made a deal with them that I was going to prove the demand by going the crowdfunding route. I didn't expect to do nearly as well as we did. We're 8.35, I think, now in funds raised. We had a campaign that ran on our own site as well as a Kickstarter campaign. We continue to sort of manage and run our site, and it's still every day we're bringing in anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, which is great, because my actual goal with Star Citizen is to try and make it a completely community-funded and driven game. And I'm actually now backing off on some of the investors that had sort of committed before, because the problem with investors or the problem with publishers is their motivations are slightly different than my motivation is I want to make the best game possible. An investor thinks a good game is good because you're going to make profit, and then at some point he can take his investment out and double it or triple it or quadruple it. A publisher wants to get a good game because he thinks he'll sell a lot of copies and make a profit. What you guys care about is a good game, which is what I care about. If you take a look at every single small, cool developer that gets bought by any one of the big publishers and track it about 3 or 4 years on, you will see that every single one of them, the key people leave and the projects themselves suddenly start to lose that edge. That's just what happens. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because if I'm a big publisher, I've got public shareholders and I've got to answer to them, and they want me to make a profit, so their motivations are slightly different. But I love the idea of having a direct connection to the community, because your guys' motivation is awesome game to play. My motivation is building an awesome game and playing it with you guys. Here's some stats that may be interesting for you guys. We have over 100,000 people part of our community. I think about 120, 30,000 registered on our site. Of that, we did a survey. I think we had about 12,000 people reply. So this is a fairly good statistical sample of it. 69% of our backers are over 25, so it's not a kiddie game, let me put it that way. 89% of our backers game on a desktop versus a laptop, and the one thing that really blew me away was 81% of the backers built their own PC. 94% of them running 64-bit version of Windows. 75% had more than 8 gigs or more. Not surprisingly, kind of like the same way I was, 58% of them also own at least one console. There's also a fair amount that have SSDs and really good internet connections. So, I mean, I guess that sort of indicates that I think maybe one thing that you get in the PC arena is that you get older people that probably have jobs, so they can afford to have nicer equipment, better internet connections. And so, you know what? Sometimes maybe you should make games for that audience, because I think too many people are trying to make games that work on a browser and are really basic experiences. 29% of the people who responded to the survey told they intended to use the Oculus Rift when it was available for the game, which I think is pretty interesting, and it's a pretty good sign for the Oculus guys, because that's kind of a bit of a canary in the coal mine thing there. 66% of our backers backed because they wanted to support a game made specifically for PC, and they sort of feel like they've been overlooked, so when someone's supporting them, then they come out in kind. One of the things that changes, though, that when we do in the crowdfunded model is, instead of being all inside the publisher, we're now completely transparent, which I actually think is a great thing. There isn't anything super, super secret about what we do, and I think that if you're committed enough and you're interested enough in a game or a genre and you're going to put your money up, I think you deserve to see how things are going, and it's actually kind of fun. And by the way, on the team that's making the game, it's fun too, because they get to expose their work to a pretty wide community and get feedback and recognition for it. From my standpoint, it makes a better game, because we very early in the process now are essentially seeing what is important for people or what isn't important for people. And a lot of times I've made games in the past where we've just sort of gone off in a cave for 3 years and then released the game, and it's come out and we're like, wow, if we knew people were like not going here, that feature that we spent 6 months on, and they were doing this stuff over here, which we spent like a week on, I think we would have changed our priorities around. Every time we put out, like, here's a game mechanic, the crowds think through every single iteration much quicker than we can internally on a team, and it's a really good thing. In the old days, the developer would make the game, and a lot of times I always used to build my own tech and production tools, which also cost money and took time. Then we had the publisher in the way, then we're doing publishing free marketing, then there was a sales rep, and then there's a retail buyer and the retail staff, and then finally it gets down to the consumer. That's a lot of people along the way. That's a lot of people that take money off the table as it goes along the way. It's also a lot of people that get in the way of the direct communication with the people that really count, the people that are playing the games, the people that love the games. Now, in the sort of direct to consumer model that is really crowdfunding, there isn't any of that. I mean, you're just, bam, plugged right in, and it's pretty great. To give you an example of also why this is really good is that if you take a look at the traditional model, essentially by the end of the day, you really got down to about a 20% royalty to the developer, which was about $12 a unit. In the direct model, the only money that's getting spent is the money you got to pay for your fees for the payment providers and whatever you spend on marketing down the road. You essentially are getting 4 times as much money coming back against the development. And so what's important about that is it means that you don't need to sell as many copies, which is good for everyone, because that means that you can have smaller, more niche genres, more interesting stuff become economically viable. Then whenever your footprint's smaller, it will allow people to innovate more or do more interesting things and not always try and iterate on like the past sequel or brand. I think that's as good for the consumer as well as it is for the developer. The traditional development is pretty much you just go off, a dark office for 2-3 years, work on the game, finish it, and then maybe at the end you take it out for a beta test. The beauty of an online game, from my perspective, is that I don't have the fear anymore of it gets put in a box and then it goes out the door and I can't update it or change it. I think that's positive for everyone. And so we're taking that to heart, what we're doing on Cloud Imperium in terms of the development of Star Citizen. So yes, the game is coming out in 2 years' time, but we're going to be releasing modules of functionality of the game over the next 2 years. The idea is that you've battle tested a lot of the functionality, you've taken a lot of your community's feedback to make the game better, and I'm hoping that will make the game a much better experience when it's fully finished. We're also doing something else with sort of distributing development teams around. I'm sort of a big believer in having small focus groups, and each one of the groups is sort of working on key features. So here in Austin, we're working on the sort of dogfighting side and the hangar side and some of the MMO stuff. In LA, we're doing some of the high-end creative and some of the general overall engine structuring, and it's also where we're sort of handling our sort of publishing aspects out. We're doing the web right now in Montreal, and we're going to be doing probably Planetside stuff and some of the first-person shooter stuff on the boarding stuff. It's sort of the Agile Scrum model, but it's sort of enforced, because the problem is when you have Agile and Scrum and you've got 100 people in one building, everyone tends to slide on a lot of the things you're meant to be doing on Agile and Scrum. Whereas if you put people in separate areas, they're forced to do smaller sprints and communicate with each other and tell each other what they're doing. The other thing that's interesting about doing the crowdfunded side is you have a very sort of fan-centric approach to how you handle press. My sort of developer brethren are always like, hey, I'm going to be in Gamma Sutra, I'm going to be in GameIndustry.biz. And what I care about is being in the press, the web outlets that the gamers read. And I think it's kind of refreshing and liberating, and I hope for the people on the other side it's something that they appreciate, that they enjoy seeing stuff as it's going along and find it pretty interesting. This is what stuff looked like back in 91 and 90. So one thing I think you'll all be very excited about is the level of fidelity in space, the graphical detail and the immersion, because it's to a level that I've never been able to achieve before. I'm trying to build a world that it's so detailed and has such great texture that you forget that it's a game, which is always my goal when I'm building games. We showed off our character, I think, on Friday, but that's the look of the Marine, some of the helmet options, although I think I'm going to go for number 3. Here's a little more in depth of the Vandal, which we'll be showing you guys. We're sort of approaching character design, the costume design, the creature design, like we would a high-end movie. And that's also one of the things to note, is that the process and the workflow of how we're building the universe and world is sort of taking some of the best people we can find in whatever role. So, we have literally the top science fiction conceptual artists that work on every single, you name the $200 million movie. They've worked on Avatar, they've worked on any of the last 3 Star Wars, they've worked on the Star Treks. Then here's a few of the Planetside environments. This is a sort of 3D and the stuff that will be happening in the environment. So the environment to the left is Terra, which is the new Earth, so to speak, and the environment to the right is Moscow on Earth. I'm pretty excited by it. I'm really enjoying the process. I thank everyone in here that has backed, and if people haven't and you're interested, you should go check it out. I throw the floor open to some questions.
So I guess this is more of a statement than a question. I would like to thank you for developing this for the PC only. I have been playing PC games for probably 25 years now, and the greatest memories I've had have been probably the mid to early 90s, like when the original XCOM came out, and definitely all the Wing Commander games. And I feel like that PC gaming has been very profoundly negatively impacted by console gaming, console publishers, to the point where a lot of the experiences are watered down. Like I am confused why everybody's so excited about that latest XCOM game that came out. I felt like it was nowhere near as good as the old one. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, no, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for being a PC gamer.
So my question is, we've seen the ships that are going to be available with Star Citizen, and there's a pretty big precedent, whether there was the first mod for Freelancer or you see in like Eve, where people go for the big capital ships. We've seen all the way up to the Bengal carrier. Is there going to be anything more than that?
Oh, bigger than the Bengal?
Yeah.
No, I don't think there's going to be anything bigger than Bengal. There'll be a couple of ships that will be about the same size as it. I mean, the Vandal's going to have its version, the Jeanne will have their version, and there will definitely be a battleship, which kind of will be about the size of the Bengal, maybe slightly smaller. But, I mean, there's a lot of ships to go. I mean, we've got, I think... I have to go take a look, but on the capital ship size, we've got at least 12 or so that we're building. So there's going to be, basically there's going to be a huge amount of variety on all all levels. But generally it's a first-person game, right? So you're not going to have 5 Bengals all jumping into the same area, going toe to toe. I mean, it'll be cool, but I don't think even something with 3 Titans in Tri SLI maybe not be able to handle that just yet. But we'll see.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a former Eve player, and I definitely understand the that kind of direct to consumer bases have a bunch of dedicated fans to them. Now, a big thing with Eve was the fact that, and personally, this is what got me into it. The fact that the massive scale of battles, just you'd see 1,000 to 2,000 people in a single system alone. And kind of the geopolitical aspect of it, you and your clan or whoever you wanted to align with would control, a piece of space. I know it might probably be, way farther down the road if ever at all. But do you think you'd ever include any sort of a player-driven political aspect or anything like that?
I don't know. We definitely have a player-driven. I mean, so the difference between us and Eve is that because we're sort of first-person and we've got a lot more sort of fidelity in the ships and the action, we can't have so many people in the same instance just because with the bandwidth issues and performance issues. But in terms of groups, running a businesses, running an enterprise, and all that, the players generate. I mean, I'm really, Eve, I thought did a really good job of letting the players themselves sort of create a lot of the content for the game itself. So that's a big thing that we're focusing on. It's just that, you may, whether you call it a clan or a squadron, just think of it being more like you and 10 people instead of you and 100 people. But there's going to be a lot of the same dynamics that are going on in terms of getting people together. And, we've got a big emphasis on the ability to support cooperative play between players to achieve things. So if you're flying a bigger ship, it's better for you to have some friends manning it as well. We still very much support the single player like privateer experience. It's just, if you have that, don't fly the bigger ship. I mean, but everything in our universe is like it's swings and roundabouts. There's no particular if even you have a bigger ship, that will have some weaknesses over a smaller nimble ship, and vice versa. So, but we're definitely it's too long of an answer here. I'll go into it down the road, but we've got some really great stuff in terms of organizations and even just the ability to run a business if you want.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Chris. This is a space sim design question. I think a lot of gamers, when they think about space sims, they often say, we want more real-time travel. We want to, fly from Hoth to Dagobah in real time. And game designers are like, no, you don't. That's boring. And what we end up with a lot is you are orbiting a planet or you're in an asteroid field and they're like hypergates connecting these nodes, and the rest is you kind of drifting through the void around those nexuses. And I was wondering, or like Mass Effect, which has like its Fisher-Price mini map where you're going around in the in the Normandy. I was wondering if Star Citizen maybe tries to tackle this and make travel a more visceral experience, or what your thoughts are.
So we're going to be somewhere between the two. So we are the systems themselves are going to be large areas that you can fly between point and point. It will not be accurate in terms of actual what the actual system distances would be, because you start to run into. I mean, for a start, that would be not that much fun, but also you start to run into the issues of floating point on scale that big. But you certainly are going to be able to, you'll be able to navigate to a nav point and autopilot or fly that distance.
Does that mean if I were in the Sol system, I'd be able to fly from Earth to Neptune without any zones going on?
Yes. Yeah. There's some tech that is sort of streams in areas in real time. Anyway, it's a sort of more technical thing to go into, but that's sort of what we're going to be running. And the thing the takeaway that's fun about it is, exploring is something that everyone has, we run our polls. I think by far, 68% of the people said they wanted to be exploring, or maybe even higher. I'd have to take a look at that. But it was by far the number one. And so we're going to have a lot in, say, the systems themselves that will have certain areas that are mapped on your navigation map, but other areas will be unmapped. And you will not be able to navigate to it because it won't be on your map. So you'll actually have to fly in real time. So it'll allow people to sort of maybe discover an asteroid field that has a rich seam of minerals in that you can go mine. So I could see a lot of players just sort of flying around some parts of systems and mapping it, as well as discovering jump points and doing that.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
I was wondering, how many admirals did you end up with?
You mean which? Well, we have lots. We have vice admirals, rear admirals, high admirals.
I'm a real admiral. I was just wondering how many people were on that admiralty level.
I'll tell you right now. Hang on. I'll pull it up. It was It was actually one of the. You can tell. It was one of the stats. If I pull up the ship stat, I'll tell you. See, that's good. Yeah. I don't even need to ask. Hang on a sec. Where's the way? Yeah, here we are. It'll be on the screen big for you. So yeah, basically there you are. So, I think it's 250 is the admiral. So it's probably. I would say my guess is something like 5,000, maybe a little less. At the 250 or above level. There you go.
Why did you choose CryEngine?
Why did I choose CryEngine? A couple of reasons. I was I actually had both. I was working with Unreal 4 and CryEngine. They're both really great pieces of technology. Unreal 4 is just early in the process, and I was making a lot of. I first of all done a lot of the prototyping work in CryEngine, and then I'm promising to deliver this pretty ambitious game, and I was starting to get a bit nervous on the Unreal 4 side because I was seeing the builds and there was refactoring going on, and I think it's going to be a great piece of kit. I mean, it's really well built and engineered, but I think it's not mature yet. So when Epic shipped the first thing with Unreal 4, then I think it's different. Right. So the irony was, it used to be people didn't think CryEngine was mature, and so they went with Unreal 3. I didn't want to go with Unreal 3 because it was going to be dead technology, so I was either going to do Unreal 4 or Cry, and so that's kind of the way. And then the only other thing is that Cry has a certain rendering style that's slightly more sort of photorealistic, whereas Unreal's a bit more sort of, it works well for the Gears of War. They've gone for a certain style. And I sort of felt like the CryEngine style matched up more for that look of Star Wars I kind of wanted.
And do you plan to do any mod tools?
Oh yeah, we're definitely doing mod tools. So yeah, that's part. I mean, that was part from day one. We're going to have mod tools like Freelancer did, actually, probably more sophisticated mod tools too. So so if you play around with the free SDK, then you'll probably feel pretty familiar with what will happen on Freelancer, Star Citizen, not Freelancer.
Thank
10
you.
10 years behind at the moment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, how do you reconcile the persistent world sandbox player-driven content side with the sort of the high bar you had with structured storytelling in Wing Commander and Freelancer?
So we have Squadron 42 that's in the game, which is essentially the Wing Commander experience. And what happens is you sign up when you first play the game. You sign up, and you play it. And since you're in the military, you kind of go where the military tells you to. I mean, that's what happens in real life. So the Squadron 42 campaign is very much like the Wing Commander campaigns, where it has branching, good, bad path, and relationships you'll manage with your wingman. I mean, it's going to be very much the spiritual successor. If I was building a Wing Commander today, Squadron 42 is what that will be. And then, sort of in the bigger sort of sandboxy game, we're going to have sort of shorter story arcs. So we're going to have player-driven stuff, and then we're also going to have some scripted stuff that will be sort of adding flavor. But that will be more in the sort of free, privateer vibe. So there won't be an overarching story in the open persistent world. The kind of concept is we have a sort of timeline that we think the universe is going to go along in terms of certain events. We're sort of patterning it after kind of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. And so there will be a point when Earth will be sacked by the Vandal. but there will be other events that will be completely, we're going to try and make player driven. So we're going to sort of, the idea we have these constant content updates, and we'll hopefully be dropping stuff like literally weekly, and we'll be looking at seeing what the players are doing in the universe and pulling some of hopefully that back into some of our news updates and stories, or maybe play off it and see. So I sort of view the persistent universe stuff as kind of like a D&D campaign, and we're sort of dungeon masters, and we're sort of, we're riffing off what the players are doing. We've kind of given them sort of areas to play in, and then we've got to work quickly on our feet.
So rather than having them be mutually exclusive, you're kind of just doing both. And they
yeah. You're going to do both. I mean, we actually, we're probably, we were thinking about in Squadron 42 maybe getting some story reports, like when you get news reports, some of it is like driven from what's happening in the persistent universe and stuff like that. But the idea should feel like you're in the persistent universe, you go off in the military campaign, which is very structured, and then when you muster out, you're back into the open sandbox
Thank you.
game.
So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for Freelancer. It was a fantastic experience. And when I was playing that game, I thought, the thing I wanted the absolute most was to be able to do first person while you're on the planet, first person shooter. So I just wanted to ask, what were the challenges combining first person shooter and Space Simulator in Star Citizen?
That was actually one of the easiest things, because essentially Star Citizen is a first-person, basically it's a first-person shooter, and it just has heavy emphasis on vehicular combat. So the way CryEngine works anyway is it's a first-person shooter engine that has good vehicle support. So it's kind of all the first-person shooter aspect's kind of out of the box. I never showed it off in the prototype, but I could run around with guns and shoot up other AI, or shoot up my ship, or do all that sort of stuff. So what was the bigger challenge was sort of layering on a higher level of vehicular simulation and control, because CryEngine and even all the other first-person shooters have much more basic sort of vehicle systems in them, and don't do nearly as much simulation and have as many features. So most of the work was actually not really on the first person, because that's kind of already there. It was really building all the other stuff on top to sort of be able to have a greater range of scale, right? Because normally on foot, you only worry about a kilometer or so each direction, whereas we're flying in space, so we have like hundreds of thousands of kilometers, so you have to deal with the scale issues and all that sort of stuff. So I would say the challenge was more making the space bit than the first-person shooter stuff. I don't know if that helps you out, but...
Yeah, that's great. Cool, thank you.
Hey, Chris. So I've been a fan since the Wing Commander days and all through Digital Anvil times. And I've been dreaming of this since Traveller back in '78.
Yes, Traveller's a great game. That's actually one of the inspirations of Privateer, Traveller. And so, and I think also Elite was pretty much inspired by Traveller too. So.
Okay. Well, I had a question regarding some of the newer technologies like Oculus Rift, if you could comment on how it fits into your plans for the game. Also, where do new user interface modalities like natural language processing or gesture input from things like Leap or the next gen version of Kinect and things like that fit into your?
Well, they're all they're all things that we're going to do and we're working on. So for me, one of the great things about the PC is. Yes, okay, so it costs a bit more money, and yes, it can occasionally be a configuration nightmare, but you can configure it to do a whole bunch of different things and try new things out, and it's much easier to deploy new technologies. So, when we first put sound in Wing Commander 2, it was just because, we met these little crazy Sound Blaster guys, and we're a very small company there.
That was me.
All right, there's you. All right, and we're like, hey, this is cool, let's do digital sound. All those things are really interesting and important, I think. And so for me, really supporting peripherals that increase the experience is important. I think I've mentioned before, but my goal would be to sort of have the Rift have something like a Leap, and your hands-on throttle and stick setup, and I'm sitting in a chair, and that's pretty much kind of virtual reality. It's actually it's easier to do it for Star Citizen than it is for Doom, because most of the time you're sitting down flying in a cockpit, so it's just going to feel more natural looking around and doing stuff. So we're going to do that. We already actually have stereoscopic 3D in the game right now. So the Rift support's pretty easy once the Crytek guys have hooked it into their stuff. I want the other thing that I've mentioned before, but I want everything that you see in your point of view is what you do. So like if you're on your controller or stick and you do something, you should see it mimicked by your avatar. And then if you like flip a switch in your cockpit, your actual hand should leave the throttle and flip the switch. And by the way, if you want to change, you can't change velocity until your hand's back on the throttle. So I mean, I kind of want to have it really sort of feel immersive, and you should take some decisions then based on like, is this the right time to deploy this if I'm in the middle of a dogfight and I want to be changing my velocity.
Last question then. Do you see any role for a second screen device in the game, a tablet or a phone, as part of the persistent universe?
We're already supporting, or we've already said we're going to do a tablet app, which would mostly be sort of checking in, be allowing you to sort of set up missions, do trading, check on how things are going in the universe. I think that I would. We're going to look in at doing sort of supporting second screens to be sort of, like using a tablet as a touch screen input that would feed into the main game. I can't promise that's going to be day one support, but that's definitely something we want to be doing. And because anything that makes that more immersive. I mean, I think I said in the VR panel on Friday that we're going to try and build basically a flying pod where we have a movable platform, and you got the VR on and the stick and everything. I mean, it won't be a setup that like everyone will be able to have, but we'll hopefully have it and we can take it around to like shows like PAX or Gamescom, and everyone that's backed it, just shows a citizen card and comes in and gets to try it out. It'd be kind of cool.
Hi, Chris.
Hey.
I think you recognize me.
I do.
So how would
this is the son of Wingman? Very back.
Yep.
Yeah.
How do you feel about bringing PC games back to a younger generation like myself?
I think it's great. I mean, firstly, I think there's stuff that PC games do that console games can't do and don't do, and there's possibilities. So I think, I know you're pretty badass on the 360, but. We need to get you badass on Star Citizen.
No, that will come.
And I have to say that the other thing I will say is that I definitely like 10 years ago when consoles sort of started to gain the prominence. PCs were a bit of a nightmare in terms of config and installation, all the rest of the stuff. But I have to say, Windows 7. I'm not a big fan of Windows 8, but Windows 7 is the best operating system I've had on any one of my PCs. It's completely rock stable. It detects everything I plug into it. I'm developing crashing. I never reboot the system. So it's, I think what's happened is that side of things has gotten actually a little better and more stable. So I think when people have the games again, I don't think it will be quite the issues that were, say, 15 years ago when you were trying to get games to run. That's my theory. I'll see. As soon as we start deploying live to 100,000+ people, I'm sure they'll be like, I can't believe this configuration of hardware doesn't work. Oh, no. But that's the way it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other question? No, you want to?
No, I'm just saying I'm telling all my friends about this game. So.
Yeah. I know. You got to get the word out there.
Yeah.
We got to get everyone back to PC. Wrap it up. Okay. All right. Well, hey, it's been nice. Thanks, guys. Thanks for supporting us there.